Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's start the text where we left off from last time. So as you can see there, the PDFs on your screens. And it says وَأَمَّا الْحُكْمُ الْأَقْلِي حُكْمُ الْعَادِي. So we're now continuing from where we left off at the bottom of page 2. أَمَّا الْحُكْمُ الْعَادِي, the customary ruling, the judgment we make by way of repetition, as we've explained, but a more detailed definition is given here, not the basic sort of things we said. There's a few details here which are very important. It says فَهُوَ إِثْبَاتُ الرَّبْطِ بَيْنَ أَمْرٍ وَأَمْرٍ وُجُودًا أَوْ عَدَمًا بِوَاسِطَةِ التَّكْرَارِ or تَكَرُّرِ. Okay, this is the main part of the definition. And then it says مع صحة التخلف وعدم تأثير أحدهما في الآخر البتة, which in English translates to the following. At the bottom there of the page says, as for the customary judgment, it is the establishment of a connection between an affair and another affair. So two things, they're connected. Fire and burning was our example, food and satiation, medicine and cure. These are all cause and effect. Repetition has shown us things work like this, so we judge them to have these effects. How does that all work is a very important discussion we need to understand today. Either in something occurring or being non-existent. So it could be something that occurs, this connection, or the connection could be a non-occurrence, if you like, right? Example, we're accustomed for fire to burn, okay? And we're accustomed for a lack of fire to have no heat, right? So we're accustomed to, let's say, the no sun, results in no warmth, right? So a lack of something. It's just how things work in life, right? By means of repetition. So we establish the connection by means of repetition. Whilst there is a possibility of no outcome, okay? Whilst that cause, this affair, being linked to this affair by repetition, produces a result, produces something occurring or not occurring, but whilst there's a possibility of no outcome, what we're accustomed to may not occur, in other words. And there is a total absence of effect for one of the two affairs upon the other. So there's no effect of the fire in the burning, or the sun in giving us heat, or in food satiating, or fulfilling our desires, or in medicine curing, in of itself, in the intrinsic value or being of that thing. It has no actual ta'thir, right? The Arabic word was ta'thir, which means no effect. And maybe we can touch on a point here which is relevant to us right now. Contagious diseases, right? Contagious diseases are the very same thing. A disease, a virus, bacteria, any form of disease that can spread in any form that Allah has created will only have its resultant effect by Allah's creation. So that's not in the definition there, because that's our beliefs behind the definition. But the definition tells us that due to it seeing a repetition of this virus or this bacteria or these elements producing these results, we can conclude by way of a customary judgment of using our intellects along with the repetition that if somebody is exposed, may Allah protect you all, to something of this nature, it will result in this. So for instance, we're talking about contagious diseases. It could be something as simple as the flu, the common cold, which I suppose coronavirus is like type of flu that they say is from the same category of viruses. But it's just the fact that you could be near somebody. I believe leprosy in the past was similar, right? You could catch it from being around a leper and so forth, right? So these are the ways that things work in terms of worldly cause and effect. That's what this is referring to, the world of cause and effect that we see. What we believe, therefore, as you can see in this definition, is there is no actual effect in one of the things in the other. So do viruses actually have an intrinsic, inbuilt kind of effect in themselves against something else? The answer is no. The answer is no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a system, put together a system where when we have a cause, He creates the effect. So every time you're exposed to the virus, if Allah wants, He'll create the disease. The actual, virus will affect you. And if He decides for it not to affect you, it won't affect you, even with it being around you. And similarly, by the way, if Allah wants to bring on a disease or give you a challenge without a cause, so to give you an illness without a cause, it's also possible, because it's in the power of Allah to create what he wants. We're accustomed to the asbab or the causes. They're not required for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't have to work through asbab. He works direct. إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. He says to it, be, and it is. Right? He doesn't need to go through processes like some have said. So this is something we're going to talk about in terms of the different beliefs regarding this hukm al-adi. So to continue, that's the definition. And it then says after that in the Arabic, وَأَقْسَامُهُ أَرْبَعَةٌ. The categories of this are also four. It says ربط وجود بوجود كربط وجود الشبع بوجود الأكل وربط عدم بعدم كربط عدم الشبع بعدم الأكل وربط وجود بعدم كربط وجود الشبع جوع بعدم الأكل وربط عدم بوجود كربط عدم الجوع بوجود الأكل. Which all that means is as follows. Its categories are four. If we come to the page here, there we go. The linking of something that occurs to something else that occurs, such as the connection between satiation and consumption of food. So what that means is two affirmatives. Something occurs because something else is present, right? And just to make a note here, this is all about asbab. We do have in hukm al-adi as well shurut and mawani, meaning there are legal causes, preventive factors and preconditions. There are also customary causes, preconditions and preventive factors. We're just going to deal with cause and effect, or cause, without going into preconditions and preventive factors. But I'll give you an example of a preventive factor. For fire, for instance, right? It's customary, talking about customary things now, like everyday habits and what we see, that the cause of fire, so an example of the first one could be fire and burning, as well as eating and food and satiation. But nevertheless, we have fire that gives us burning. So the burning effect is the creation of Allah, as we're going to say all the time. That's not really in this right now, but it's just talking about the connection based on repetition. So that repetition of a fire being present produces the repetition of a heat and burning effect. Okay, there's a preventive factor to that, which is also customary, which is moisture, which is water basically, like a lack of something that prevents the fire from actually giving heat off, right? So we know that we can put fire out by water. That's also customary, isn't it? The fact that fire goes out with water. So water is almost like a customary preventive factor, a mani adi, mani, as we used before the term preventive factor. We said shari'i, in sharia there's mawani, right? There are things that prevent certain other rulings from being effective or enacted. Similarly, in everyday life, there are things that prevent things from happening by way of customary kind of things, right? Like for instance, gravity stopping you from flying, right? That's a preventive factor in a sense, right? So we're not going to go into preventive factors and preconditions when it comes to the hukm al-adi. We're just going to talk about the sabab, so cause and effect, basically cause, sabab, and the effect, musabbab, without dealing with, and you can figure them out because they're all everyday things, right? What would be the preventive factors or preconditions to things? They're just everyday things. Like for instance, for satiation, I would say for this, you can't feel satiation, which means feel full, if you're already full. So a precondition of becoming satiated by eating food is hunger. So the precondition of feeling satiation, obviously eating and getting nourishment is not a precondition. You will get nourishment and you probably won't get a lot because you've already got a lot of food in you. So it's just extra, which isn't good. But nevertheless, that's health. Leave that out of the equation. A precondition of feeling satiated is to have hunger before you eat. If you don't have hunger and you eat, you're not really satiating yourself. You are enjoying yourself, feeling nice. I don't know. It does bring about some pleasure because that's what food does, right? The cause and effect of food is it releases these chemicals in your brain, endorphins and things like this, right? That make you feel nice. So cause and effect, that's all cause and effect. You can use that as an example of cause and effect as well. So this is the presence of consumption of food. That's a cause of satiation. Okay, that's existent. These are rabtu wujudin bi wujudin, right? The connection of something that exists, that occurs, with something else that occurs. Number two, the linking of something that does not occur to something that does not occur. So this didn't happen, so this didn't happen, right? So these are things that don't happen. So we just have to understand why they didn't happen. Such as the connection between no satiation, I'm hungry, right? So I've got no satiation. So although it's an existence of hunger, it's also the lack of existence or lack of occurrence of being full, satiation. Occurring due to a lack of eating. So if I didn't eat and I still feel hungry, I've got no eating, therefore I've got no satiation. This is simple connections, right? The linking of something that occurs to something that does not occur. Something occurs, and the food is used here as all the examples, just showing you how we can word sentences and talk about everyday effects, right? So we could say, for instance, no fire, no burning, right? That's how it works, right? So there's a lack of fire doesn't allow us to burn, right? You can use other things to burn, but there's no fire, there's no burning, right? No heat. The link of something that occurs, something that does not occur, such as the connection between the occurrence of hunger. So this is number 3. So something that occurs, so we've got hunger, it's an occurrence. Due to something not occurring, which is not eating food, therefore it says due to a lack of consumption and no occurrence of consumption of food. I think it's straightforward, these connections, right? Just logically kind of possibilities, and they're straightforward. And the final one is the linking of something that does not occur to the existence of something that does not occur. Okay? That does occur, excuse me, I was going to say that number 2 was does occur, right? Yeah, the linking of something that does not occur to something that does occur. The opposite of number 3. Number 3 was something that occurs, it doesn't produce something, right? It disrupts something. So something that occurs is hunger. What does it produce due to a lack of? Also, the occurrence of hunger is existent, is due to a lack of occurrence, non-existence of food, right? No consumption of food. The opposite to that basically is something that does not occur due to the existence of something else. So, such as the connection between the lack of hunger. So there's no occurrence of hunger due to what? If you've eaten, right? Due to something else occurring, which is eating. I think the logically sound deductions and kind of overview there of the hukam al-adi, right? And this is a very, very important hukam. Just to let you know, it's very important that there are 4 schools of thought with regard to the hukam aqli, which we're going to talk about later, inshallah, in the book itself. So I'm not going to go through too much. The text itself is what we're going to follow as much as we can. But just to put this in your minds and for you to remember this for future reference and for us to go into this in the future, the 4 schools of thought, the 4 approaches to repetition and occurrence is number 1, the iltizam. So iltizam is the connection, the sticking together, the rabt. Different words, rabt, connection, the ta'alluq, the connection, the irtibat or the iltizam. They're all different Arabic words meaning the connection. So the link, as in the linking of things, is iltizamun aqliyun, is rational. What that means is logical, meaning every time you have fire, you can't but have anything other than burning. So there's no separation possible. It's a logical conclusion, just like 1 + 1 = 2. Some thinkers, philosophers, whatever, they went this far and they started believing that this connection is a necessity. It can't be otherwise. Naturalists, people who believe in Mother Nature, they say, look, this just happens, that khalas, right? And when it doesn't happen, they explain it away and they say, look, something must be there that we don't know. They don't really want to accept that it can't be the case. So they always say it must occur. This is called iltizam aqli, those who believe in this, right? The second school of thought in this is the Mu'tazilite school. And what the Mu'tazilite school believe is that it's not a iltizam aqli, that is just cause and effect. They believe in deposited powers. Okay, so they say there is a repetition of burning from fire due to the power of burning being deposited. So deposited powers in fire. And that deposit is made by Allah, because Mu'tazilites, the rationalists, are a group that developed after the Sahaba during sort of the early generations, one of the first sects of Islam that had a lot of rational thought. The rationalists are sometimes known as in Islamic discourse. And they were influenced by Greek thought, philosophers, etc. So it occurred during the time of translation period, especially during the Abbasid Caliphate. They became very prominent at that time in Baghdad and Iraq and surrounding places. So they said there's a deposited power. The reasons for this are long and detailed, but we'll just give you the reason, the kind of basic level. There's a deposited power within the fire of burning, and Allah's deposited, the Muslims, Allah deposited there. So the fire burns because of a deposited power. Now if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to remove that power, He can, because He's Allah, right? So fire won't burn if Allah removes the power of burning. But once the power of burning is in the fire does what it wants with its power and or whenever there's a fire, it has this power with it. It comes with this power by default, deposited power, which added a stage to creation. So now Allah has to create burning according to them. He has to have a fire to create burning, because burning doesn't occur without the deposited power in the fire for burning, right? So it was a bit problematic. There is the school of thought of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, right? And that is that there is just an outer connection and a causal, what we call causality, basically, which is the outer appearance of this cause being linked to this effect through repetition. But there's, as we said, that definition is Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. There's no effect of one in the other, al-battata, whatsoever, whatsoever. And it could not occur. And why wouldn't it occur? Because if Allah doesn't want to create the result. So our definition there is the Sunni definition. And I think I said there's 4 schools, but let's stick to 3. 3 schools of thought on that. So that is a brief kind of overview of the Hukm al-Adi. And the idea is for us to know that now and memorize that and learn that and understand this. And this definition here, really memorize this, right? This is very, very important, right? I'm referring to this one here. That one there is very, very important to have, right? هو ربط أمر بأمر بواسطة التكرار نفي إثبات أمر ونفيه عنه بواسطة التكرار مع صحة التخلف وعدم تأثير أحدهما في الآخر البتة. And I missed out the part of وجود and عدم, the existent things or non-existent things. But that definition, which we memorized when we were learning, if you memorize in English, but understand it as well, please. Like, what do we understand regarding customary things that happen around us? This is what all the ulama of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah have mentioned in their books, whether they are from Africa, North Africa, Morocco, Egypt, Turkey, Makkah Sharif, Medina Munawwara, subcontinent. The orthodoxy has always held this view quite clearly, and others have not. Others have had problematic issues with this as well. So this affects many beliefs from this, right? We'll talk about that later, inshallah ta'ala. But that's the Hukm al-Adi, so please, get a grasp of that, inshallah ta'ala. Then it says, as for the rational judgment, so let's read the Arabic, inshallah. So moving down. وَأَمَّا حُكْمُ الْأَقْلِيُّ فَهُوَ إِثْبَاتُ أَمْرٍ أَوْ نَفْيُهُ مِنْ غَيْرِ تَوَقُّفٍ عَلَى تَكَرُّرٍ وَلَا وَضْعِ وَاضِعٍ وَأَقْسَامُهُ ثَلَاثَةٌ الْوُجُوبُ وَالْإِسْتِحَالَةُ وَالْجَوَازُ. Okay, so what is the Hukm al-Aqli, the rational judgment, verdict? It is the affirmation of an affair or the negation of it without any dependence upon repetition, nor the injunction or the setting up or the placing, wada, establishing of someone else. Okay, so it's not because there's a revelation in the Sharia, it's not because there's a rule of highway code, it's nobody's put these rules together and they're not based on repetition of things, we connect them. It's pure rational thought, right? Intellectual thought, reasoning of the mind, pure reason basically, right? So 1 + 1 = 2, a part of something can't be bigger than the whole, right? And these kind of statements, right? A square has 4 sides, equal sides, right? They have to be, it has 4 angles, although it's not called a square. These are things that are just necessities by in of themselves, because that's they are created by Allah, so everything is placed like this by Allah. But ultimately, as we live it, these are rules that just don't we don't need anything other than sound reasoning and thought, and they just are as they are realities. They can't be otherwise. Basically, we can make another name for a square, but end of the day, a shape with 4 equal sides and 4 angles is square. Call it stato, whatever you want. It's a reality that can't be changed, right? But we need to understand what each term means and its corresponding reality, right? So a square has to be 4 equal sides with angles. A triangle, 3 sides. Angles add up to 180 degrees and so forth, right? This is the concept of maths, really, and a lot of logical stuff comes from maths, but also other things as well. We can deduce a lot of rational decisions or judgments based on life and experiences and so forth. And this is categorized into three areas: that which is necessary, that which is wajib, i.e. necessary, but not the sharia wajib. We're not talking about sharia anymore, we're talking about logical wajib, logical necessities. Same word is used to mean necessary, but that's a legal necessity, this is a logical necessity, rational. The inconceivable, which was istihala in the Arabic, and the jaiz, that which is admissible. Again, not admissible as in it's allowed in sharia or something like this, it's just possible to occur or not to occur. It's possibilities in actual rational thought. So these are rational terms, or terms to do with rational concepts, not sharia concepts. So take out, for now let's just leave all sort of sharia studies and usul and fiqh studies and leave them to one side and just talk from a basically pure logical rational perspective of these terms, which we will then apply later to aqidah studies. Okay, very, very important. So the necessary, the conceivable, and the possible. So what are they and what do they mean? Let's read through the definitions. فالواجب, right, ما لا يتصور في العقل عدمه إما ضرورة كالتحيز للجرم مثلا، وإما نظرا كوجوب القدم لمولانا جل وعز. So this is important, actually, point that's come up, and I wanted to bring it in before, but I think the beauty of this text is it doesn't burden you with too much early on. It builds up things very nicely and slowly. So the first point is, let's read what the necessary is, and we'll talk about that point I wanted to bring in before, but it's come up now anyway. So as for the necessary, it is that which the intellect cannot perceive of being absent. So it's a necessity, it must be the case, it can't be otherwise, it can't be absent, or when you say absent, it can't be like other than this, right? Due to it being either by being intuitive, such as occupying volume for a physical body of mass, or through contemplation. So this is what I wanted to bring up earlier, that all ahkam, even the previous two, hukum adi and also sharia rulings, are not all intuitive, not all known by necessity, right, by darura, right? It's just a known, everyone knows this. Of course, the 5 daily prayers being obligations, zakat being a pillar of Islam, they are a priori, intuitive. We don't need to think or reflect, just straight into our minds. We know that these are obligations, these are parts of Islam. We know the rulings on these things. However, if I was to tell you, there's riba if you sell rice in kilograms. There's riba, there's usury if you sell rice in kilograms. Who knows what I'm talking about there? Some of you may do because you've studied fiqh and riba al-fadl, right? There's a riba al-fadl, riba sunnah is called as well, because it comes from the sunnah, the hadith. Explain this type of usury or riba, and it's got to do with rice and dates and flour. Yes, there is, right? But that is not intuitive, that's not a priori, that's not something that you just get to all of a sudden, right? All of a bang, I know what it means. That takes what? Contemplation, study. So sharia rulings, some are easy, straightforward, and you know them, and everybody knows them in a sense. They're just intuitive, daruratan. And then some that require studying, learning, and so forth. Similarly, hukam adi as well, to be honest. I mean, scientists know a lot more things that occur, and people with different engineers and stuff, right? People who work in the physical world and see things, wildlife and so forth. They will be able to understand a lot more hukam adis, a lot more customary judgments, and understand what's going on than us, because we don't experience as much, right? So again, some things are just like fire burning is default, right? No need to think about that one. But for instance, you've never seen the effect of, I don't know, new things. A food, you never tasted a food before or seen a fruit before, let's say. And so for the first time you realize this food does this, or it tastes like this, so it's not natural for you, it's not intrinsic, it's not just intuitive as it says there. It takes some contemplation of figuring out. So hukam adi, hukam shari have this concept as well. We didn't mention it then. In the hukam al-aqli, in the rational derivation of rules, sometimes it's instant, 1 + 1 = 2, instant. Every physical piece of mass, right, it occupies a space. It doesn't just exist in nothing, right? Every physical body of mass, right, it occupies a volume, right? That's reality. We all know that. We can't escape volume and places, right? It has a mahal, it has a place, right? It has tahiyyuz lil jirm. Tahiyyuz means to take up a hayyiz, a space, right? Every jirm, every body of mass has to do that. It doesn't exist outside of time and space, right? That's life, that's reality, that's facts, hard facts, undeniable. It's an example given by the author there. Or there's some things which are hard facts as well, but they take a bit of reflection, and they are logically, rationally the case. Like the square root of 64 is 8. 8 times 8 is 64. You probably all knew that. The cube root of 64 is 4, I think, right? 4 times 4 is 16 times 4 is 64. Yeah, I think it works out right. So there you go. Cube root of 64 is 4. What's going on there? Let me think of that. So you have to think. It's not too difficult if you do maths, right? But if you didn't know what the cube root of 64 is, you know now, right? It's 4. What does that? What does cube root mean even, right? We've not studied that. So some things will be difficult to comprehend on first sight, but they're not wrong. They're realities. They're facts. So cube root of 64 being 4 is a fact. Whether you've grasped it in that moment I told you or not, or it takes you a moment or reflection or even writing out things and discussion sometimes, right? You have to discuss and be given explanations. That contemplation, that nadaran, is a process to result in a sound fact that is rationally true. The example given here by our author, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Sanusi, may Allah have mercy upon him, is such as our creator, i.e. the existence of our creator, glorified be he, is necessarily, or such as our created being, necessarily pre-eternal. The qidam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning, right? That's what he's actually given as example. Such as the creator of the universe, our creator, in the Arabic actually it was إما نظرا كوجوب القدم لمولانا جل وعز, to our master, our Mawlana, our creator, master, provider, وجوب القدم, the necessity of pre-eternalness, right, of having no beginning. This is the one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, huwa al-awwalu wal-akhiru, and we'll talk about these attributes in the future when we study Aqidah, right? We're learning the preliminary, precursory discussions on Aqidah at the moment. Alhamdulillah. Just to mention one point here as well about Imam Sanusi, because we said he's our author and he wrote this amazing book and many books, and that is that somebody shared just yesterday, so after the class somebody, one of the admin, he said, oh, is this the Imam Sanusi you were talking about? And there was a little statement there by Imam Sanusi saying that whenever he wanted to find an ayah of the Quran for some discussion or proof, or just to quote something, he looked towards his right hand and he would see the ayah. The ayah would come to him just by looking into his right hand. And whenever he wanted to quote a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and he would think of something that he would require some kind of relevant hadith in that topic he was talking about or writing about, he looked towards his left hand and he would see the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So this was one of the karamat, the miracles of Imam al-Sanusi. He was one of those scholars that was so well versed in the Quran and Sunnah. They were at his fingertips, literally at his literally. As a miracle from Allah, they were at his fingertips whenever he wanted them. So most of the time, like myself, you want to find a hadith, you're like, where do I find? We use search engines now, right? You're like, oh, let's pick up Riyadh al-Salihin, let's pick up Bukhari, let's search in this chapter. Sometimes you actually read the book and you don't find, it's hard, right? Sometimes you spend hours trying to find tafsir of an ayah, and which tafsir is going to talk about this angle and so forth, But some of the scholars were so well versed and so proficient, and this is why we rely upon them and we respect them and we're honored to be following them, and this is our tradition. It's a very, very deep scholarly tradition of erudition and learning and solid foundations. They had this talent, they had this God-given gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the wajib. So the wajib in terms of the rational judgment is that which must be the case. In other words, you can't understand it being otherwise. So 1 + 1 = 2 is wajib. 1 + 1 = 3, I don't know what that is, can't understand that. That's the opposite. That's the next one, which is the mustahil, which is as follows. It says, وَالْمُسْتَحِيلُ مَا لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ فِي الْأَقْلِ وُجُودُهُ ما لا يتصور في العقل وجوده إما ضرورة كالتعري الجرم عن الحركة والسكون وإما نظرا كالشريك لمولانا جل وعز. So the mustahil is the word for inconceivable. Inconceivable means that which is just not going to occur. It's not possible for it to occur. Like 1 + 1 = 3 is not a reality. It's a statement of words that has no meaning. Okay, just like saying square circle. What's a square circle? It's just two words put together that cannot exist. It has no actual meaning, no reality that connects to those words. Okay, words can be used to portray confusing things, And this is how fallacies are brought in, right? False ways of thinking or misleading people through fallacious discussions and premises. And one of those is to use inconceivable ideas but present them as though they are real or possible, when they're just not realities at all. So when we talk about inconceivable, we don't mean that there's an ability to do it or not do it. That's not what inconceivable is. Can you make a square circle or not? No, there's no possibility of it occurring for us to then go to the second question, which is, can you do it? No. Can it occur? No. Stop. Don't ask me a further question. If it can't occur, then it can't be done by anybody. But that's the thing, we don't get to that stage. If it can't occur, full stop. We don't ask that question. It's actually absurd. It's stupidity to ask that question. And some people do go that far, and they start asking you questions about absurdities and about inconceivabilities, right? So you need to be aware of that. So the translation of what I read earlier was, as for the inconceivable, it is that which cannot be perceived to exist by the intellect. Okay, we'll talk about that point as well in a bit. Like, why are we using the intellect for? Isn't it just reality itself? Why do we need intellect for? Yes, reality itself without an intellect would be the same. It's just how Imam Sanusi rahmatullah portrayed or wanted to word his definition. Other scholars have not used the word intellect in the definition, because intellect isn't really a part of it. Of course, it's for us, therefore it's important to tell us that how we should think. But in reality, other scholars have said the mustahil is ma la yaqbal al-wujud, that which cannot be existent. Khalas. It cannot accept existence. It can't be a real thing, right? So you can have the idea of it, you can think of it, but it can't be existent. So that's what it says here as well. The inconceivable is that which cannot be perceived to exist by the intellect, right? And it can't actually exist. Actually, that's the reality of it as well. This is either intuitive, such as a body of mass being free of both movement and stillness. Think of a body of mass, right? Is it possible to be both still and moving at the same time? In terms of one looking like, in terms of the coordinates of it right here, no, it's just impossible for that to occur, right? So we're not going to be able to accept that, right? 1 + 1 = 3. Intuitive is just impossible, right? If somebody said to you, a part of his house is bigger than the whole of his house. No, a part of his house can only be smaller than his house. Or do you mean his garden is bigger than the house? Do you mean the land is bigger than the building? Which one? The house. A part of his body is bigger than the whole of his body. If it's a part of his body, it's going to be less than the whole body. It's illogical. It's inconceivable for that statement to be true. Right, so these are things we should pick up straight away, more or less, right? But then there's also things that it says here, all through contemplation, such as the inconceivability of a partner for our Creator, glorified be He, right? So again, through contemplation, we can think things are impossible and not correct and so forth. And one of those things is it's impossible for, or inconceivable, I should say, of a partner, a sharik for our Maulana Jalla wa Az, right? So our Creator, glorified. So Maulana isn't really creator. The word means the protector, the master. It's translated here as Creator, glorified be He subhanahu wa ta'ala. That requires some contemplation, reflection, which is studied in Aqidah, right? But what the author here, Imam Sanusi rahmatullah, is telling us is, be aware of this, right? There's things which are intrinsic or intuitive and just known by default by everyone, by the human mind, to most human minds, let's say. And then there are things which require contemplation and so forth, but the conclusion is the same. Conclusion is it's a must, or it's an inconceivability in this case, right? The conclusion is it's an inconceivability. Okay, so then we have the third category, which is the as it says there, as for the possible, it is that which can be perceived. So let's read the Arabic first, just for the barakah. It says, as for wal jaizu, the jaiz here meaning that which is admissible, you say it can occur, right? It's possible. ما يصح في العقل وجوده وعدمه إما ضرورة كالحركة لنا وإما نظرا لتعذيب المطيع وإثابة العاصي. So let's not get confused with what we're going to say here, but we've got to discuss it. And that translates to, as for the possibilities, that which can be perceived to exist or not exist by the intellect. So it can exist in reality. It doesn't have to exist. There's no such thing, no necessity for it to be there, right? But if it's there, or if it's in that way, like us right now, we're not necessary beings. We are contingent beings, right? So contingency is what this is about as well. What's possible and occurring in time and space is contingent. It's possible. It's temporal. And these have similarity in meaning: contingent, temporal, possible, transient, right? They're all related in different ways. This can be intuitive, right? It can be by daruratan, such as movement for us. Movement for a body is just natural, that's possible, right? Or by contemplation, such as the punishment. And this is, like I said, let's not get confused on this. Imam Sanusi is only giving you a possibility. He's not telling you this is the case. He's telling you this is just possible if we look at things based purely on rationale, on intellect. Of course, we're not, like I said to you at the beginning of this, we have not brought Sharia into the discussion yet. If we did, we wouldn't say this, right? So Imam Sunni is only presenting this as a purely rational, logical statement, not a Sharia, Islamic belief, opinion statement, right? What is it? Such as the punishment of the obedient and the rewarding of the disobedient, right? Of course, one's heart may feel that, no, wait a minute, anybody who does good must be rewarded, anybody who does bad must be punished, or at least, not made equal to the obedient. There's got to be a kind of deciphering and difference, of course, and that's what Allah will do, of course, and that's our beliefs, and etc. etc. Allah's wise and not wrong and so forth. But at the end of the day, who made it all like that? Like, who made our minds think like that? Who made it like that? It's Allah Almighty. Had He sent down the world and said, right, those of you drink alcohol will be rewarded, and those of you probably punished, and our minds were all geared to think that was right and that was wrong, but of course this is just a very hypothetical situation. It's not the reality. It's just based on pure logic, which is dangerous, by the way, and hence some of the Mu'tazilites, like we said, gave this more of a role in their thinking, whereas the Ahlul Sunnah were balanced. So we obviously say this, we understand this. Things like evil is created by God is our statements which we believe in and we have to accept, but we don't go around saying them and sharing them and then confusing people and saying, wait a minute, God creates evil, then He's a creator of evil, that's a bit bad, and so forth. We have to understand that these have to be spoken in context and explained when mentioned as well. So God creates everything to test us, and within those tests there's going to be good times and bad times. There's going to be challenges, right? And among them is evil, and that's only to test us. And if He wanted, He could have created a world without evil. Yes, He could have. He decided not to. That's His decision. Ask Him on the Day of Judgment why He did that. La yusalu amma yafalu hum yusalun. He does not get questioned about what He does, but you will be questioned and accountable. So rather than try and put Allah on trial and figure out why He's doing this to us, which we have no right to and we are not in a position to, creation and creator are two different things. Let's figure out what we're going to be questioned about and our responsibilities, which we have been commanded to follow, right? So in a sense, we don't have a right to do certain things or ability as creation, right? But nevertheless, that's a possibility in of itself, right? We're looking at just logical possibilities. Other possibilities are things like us being here today, right? It says there, right? Our movement, right? Other possibilities, or hukam adi. All the hukam adis are possibilities. Fire burning is a possibility on a rational perspective. Yeah, if you look at rational, say fire burning is perspective. A tree having green leaves is possible. Allah could have created the world with orange leaves, which is the case when it's winter, right? Or the autumn. But let's say Allah could have made and the odd leaves are different colors for different plants around the world. I do know, but let's say a funky color, right? A luminous yellow. Probably somebody's going to say there are luminous yellow leaves in the world as well for some things, right? I don't know. But yeah, so this is all things which are possible. Of course, they are made in particular ways by Allah, but in of themselves as existent things, there's nothing to say it must be. If we took out plants, if we took out animals, that's possible, right? There's nothing to say it must be there. Of course, in the greater plan that Allah has made, everything has its role and purpose. And to take some things out would affect the whole equilibrium of what Allah has created. He's created an amazing world with an equilibrium which we're tipping the balance. We're causing the gaps in the ozone layer and the fossil fuels and the carbon dioxide and all these kind of things. So we're destroying the world and the equilibrium Allah set up for us. But He set it up. So there is a setup that Allah has put there for us that we follow. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so that then concludes the section on the hukam al-aqli as well. So we've done three things now, or three ahkam. Hukam al-shar'i, which is sharia usul. Hukam al-adi, the customary ruling, which is based on repetition and connecting cause and effect in life that we see, which is important. We said there's the madhab of the rationalists, naturalists. It doesn't ever change. The Mu'tazilites is deposited power. Sunnis, there's no power, no effect, nothing other than a connection, which Allah then creates at the time of cause being present. So then there's fire and burning. Allah creates the burning at the time of all the conditions and causes being there. And then we then discuss the hukam al-aqli right now, which is the discussion on rational thought, which is categorized into that which is necessary and that which is inconceivable and that which is possible. Necessary means it must exist and not be otherwise. So if we look at things in life, that must be the case, such as 1 + 1 = 2. Mathematics comes into it a lot, right? But also if you look at it from a metaphysical perspective of belief in God, then God must exist. That's a rationally logical necessity. We'll talk about that in Aqidah, and scholars do talk about the proofs of God from a logical perspective as well as a scriptural perspective. So there's both ways of establishing the existence of God and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we discuss the inconceivabilities, such as, things that can't be the case, like for instance, object being still and moving at the same time is just not possible, or being free of both of them. It's just not possible. It's inconceivable, right? It's just not a reality. Square circle, not reality. And then we talked about the possible matters, and the possible matters are those things which can happen or not happen. Right? It can be this way, it could be another way. There's nothing to say it must be like this, and changing it would result in anything illogical. Right? So this is the hukam al-aqli, and then we move on to the schools of thought regarding human actions, and we will finish there. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So any questions are welcome.